Sign right here, Mrs. Reed, and the $35 million will transfer directly into your joint account, the notary said, pushing a thick stack of legal documents across the polished marble table. My husband Dominic leaned back in his leather chair, practically vibrating with smug satisfaction. He didn't even try to hide the predatory glint in his eyes. He thought he'd won. He thought $35 million of my late grandfather's estate was about to drop right into his lap. I took a deep breath, opened my mouth to finally tell him the truth, that I knew about his secret offshore accounts, that I knew he'd been planning to bleed me dry, when the notary paused. His phone buzzed. He picked it up, scrolled for a few seconds, and the color instantly drained from his face. The room went dead silent. The notary adjusted his glasses, looked at the screen, then looked up at me with an expression of sheer terror. "Ma'am," the notary stopped me cold, his voice trembling. "Our records show the divorce was finalized 2 months ago, signed by you, and filed in court." 5 seconds of absolute suffocating stillness filled the room. Dominic's face went completely blank. I looked at Dominic. I looked at the notary. Then I shifted course. "Oh," I said, leaning back and crossing my legs, my voice as calm as still water. "So the fraud is already on the official state record. Perfect. They had no idea what was coming. 3 months earlier. To the rest of the world, I was just Evelyn Reed, the quiet, plain wife who stayed home while her brilliant husband built a multi-million-dollar tech venture. Dominic loved reminding me of that, every single day. "You're lucky I took a chance on you, Evelyn," he'd say over breakfast, barely looking up from his iPad. "Without me, you'd still be working a desk job in a dead-end town." "You don't have the stomach for the real world," I never argued. I just smiled, poured his coffee, and kept my mouth shut. Everyone in our social circle saw me as a pushover. Dominic's high-powered friends treated me like invisible furniture. His mother, Victoria, took every opportunity at family dinners to mock my background. "It's a good thing Dominic is so generous," Victoria would sneer, sipping her expensive wine. Some women just don't know how to build anything for themselves. I let them talk. I let them laugh. Because what Dominic, his mother, and their elite friends didn't realize was that I wasn't weak. I was patient. And more importantly, nobody in that room knew the truth about who I really was. For 5 years, Dominic had been systematically draining our shared funds to finance his grand tech startup, Vance Dynamics. He treated me like a naive simpleton who couldn't read a bank statement. He didn't know that long before I met him, I had earned a master's degree in forensic accounting from Columbia. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to throw dishes. Every time he insulted me, I simply opened my laptop and tracked another one of his shell companies. I noticed the subtle changes first. The late nights at the office. The sudden password changes on his laptop. The way he started dropping hints about how stressful marriage was. Then came the real discovery. Dominic wasn't just planning to leave me. He had hired a disgraced, shady attorney to forge my signature on a covert divorce decree, filing it in a tiny, corrupt county 3 hours away. His plan was simple. Keep the divorce secret until he secured a massive cash infusion, lock me out of all assets, and then present me with a forged prenup that left me with nothing. He was waiting for a big payday to execute the final blow. And then my grandfather passed away. My grandfather, Arthur Montgomery, was a legendary real estate tycoon. He was a notoriously private man who lived in a modest home, which led Dominic to believe he was just a comfortable pensioner. Dominic had no clue that Arthur held a massive, undisclosed portfolio of commercial properties across the eastern seaboard. When news reached Dominic that I was named the sole beneficiary of my grandfather's estate, his eyes turned into dollar signs. The estimated value? $35 million. Suddenly, the husband who hadn't touched me in 6 months was buying me diamonds, bringing me breakfast in bed, and urging me to execute the inheritance transfer immediately, into a joint corporate trust he controlled. "It's just for tax purposes, sweetie," he had reassured me with that fake, slick smile. "Let my legal team handle it. You don't need to worry your pretty little head about the numbers." He thought he was setting a trap for me. Remember that detail. It matters later. He had no idea he was walking straight into mine. The week before the notary meeting, Dominic's arrogance reached its absolute peak. He hosted an intimate dinner party at our penthouse for his high-profile investors, his mother, and his new senior consultant, a younger woman named Sienna, whom he thought I didn't know he was sleeping with. During the toast, Dominic stood up, raising his glass. "To success," Dominic announced, smirking at Sienna before looking down at me. and to knowing how to manage wealth. Because having money is one thing, but having the intelligence to use it. Well, that's where most people fail, isn't it, Evelyn? Laughter rippled around the table. Victoria chuckled loudly. Sienna smirked into her wine glass. Evelyn's just fortunate she has you to handle the heavy lifting, darling, Victoria added, casting a patronizing look in my direction. She'd probably give it all away to an animal shelter. I didn't flinch. I didn't get up and run away crying. I simply took a slow sip of my water, looked Dominic dead in the eye, and smiled. You're right, Dominic, I said softly. Managing wealth requires extreme attention to detail. You never know when one small oversight can ruin everything. Dominic laughed it off, assuming it was the desperate attempt of a dull woman trying to sound smart. That was his first mistake. Which brings us back to the high-rise conference room, 5 seconds after the notary broke the news. Ma'am, our records show the divorce finalized 2 months ago. The air in the room turned to ice. Dominic's face went from smug triumph to sickly pale in a fraction of a second. What are you talking about? He stammered, his polished voice suddenly cracking. That's impossible. There's been a mistake. Evelyn, tell him. I didn't say a word. I just watched him sweat. I checked the state registry as required for joint trust execution, the notary explained, his hands shaking as he pulled up the official court records on a tablet. A final decree of divorce was granted 8 weeks ago in Chester County, signed by Dominic Vance and Evelyn Reed. That was supposed to be sealed until next month. Dominic blurted out, the panic completely stripping away his refined composure. The moment those words left his mouth, the entire room gasped. His own corporate lawyers pulled their hands away from the table as if it were on fire. So you admit it, I said, my voice cold, calm, and echoing clearly off the glass walls. You forged my signature on a fraudulent divorce filing 2 months ago, so you could claim I was no longer entitled to marital assets. Evelyn, wait! No, that's not what I... Dominic scrambled, pushing his chair back so hard it slammed into the wall. It was a strategy, a legal maneuver to protect our taxes. And then, I continued, stepping forward, you brought me here today to sign over a $35 million inheritance into a joint account, assuming I was still legally your wife, so you could siphon it off into your offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Dominic froze. His breathing turned ragged. How do you know about the Caymans? This is where everything changed. I opened my leather briefcase, pulled out a sleek silver flash drive, and placed it gently on the center of the table. Because, Dominic, I said, leaning in closer, you thought you were marrying a meek, clueless housewife. You forgot that before I met you I audited Fortune 500 companies for a living. I gestured to the door. Right on cue, the heavy oak doors of the conference room swung open. 3 men in dark tailored suits walked in, flanked by 2 uniformed officers from the State Financial Crimes Unit. The man in the lead pulled out a badge. Dominic Vance? I'm Special Agent Miller with the State Attorney General's office. We have a warrant for your arrest for grand larceny, wire fraud, identity theft, and corporate embezzlement. Dominic's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. What? This is ridiculous. On what evidence? On the evidence provided by your ex-wife, Agent Miller replied smoothly. She's been working alongside our forensic unit for the past 90 days. The room went dead silent again. You could hear a pin drop. Dominic turned to me, his face twisted in utter disbelief and terror. You set me up? You set yourself up, Dominic, I replied smoothly. You were so distracted trying to steal my grandfather's money that you didn't notice I purchased the primary debt on Vance Dynamics 3 weeks ago through a private holding firm. I didn't just let you finalize that fraudulent divorce. I let it stand. I picked up my designer bag and adjusted my coat. Which means Vance Dynamics is currently in default, I added, looking him up and down. And as the majority debt holder, I seized all company assets 45 minutes ago. You don't own a company anymore, Dominic. You don't even own the car parked downstairs. It all belongs to the Montgomery estate. Dominic collapsed back into his chair, his knees completely giving out. The color was entirely gone from his face. He looked stripped, small, and utterly defeated. The officer stepped forward, pulled his arms behind his back, and clicked the handcuffs into place. As they led him toward the door, he looked back at me, tears of panic finally breaking through his arrogant mask. Evelyn, please. We can talk about this. You can't do this to me. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. I simply offered him a polite, quiet nod. Have a good afternoon, Dominic. Epilogue. The fallout was swift and absolute. With the financial records I provided to the authorities, Dominic was convicted on multiple counts of federal wire fraud and forgery. He was sentenced to 12 years in a maximum security federal prison, with zero chance of early parole. Because his corporate assets were seized to pay off his massive debts, his mother, Victoria, was forced to sell her lavish estate to pay for his legal fees. Last I heard, she moved into a tiny 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town, the very same kind of town she used to mock me for coming from. Sienna, his consultant, vanished the moment the handcuffs snapped shut, taking whatever small crumbs Dominic had given her and leaving him to face the music entirely alone. As for me, I took my $35 million inheritance and launched a non-profit foundation dedicated to providing legal and financial resources to victims of domestic abuse and economic control. I bought a beautiful, quiet home by the coast. No noise, no condescending comments, no gaslighting, just peace. They thought I was weak because I stayed quiet. They thought my silence was surrender. They failed to realize that sometimes silence is just the sound of a storm gathering on the horizon.